Deputy Sheriff Mike Carpinelli from Lewis County over here, and Sheriff Tom Laurie from the nearby Fulton County. And we're equally proud to be joined by a number, and not necessarily all, but a number of deputies that were here in the audience. We know there's a lot of other off-duty police officers here, but we're glad that those that we recognized were able to join us, along with the Oath Keepers. Now, we really welcome that introduction, but they said to you that the most important people for you to know was your sheriff, because this introduction that we were the most important. All of us know that's not correct. You are the most important people. And our Constitution is the most important document in our country. And we can't believe that it took this long for anybody to say to you, Happy April Fool's Day. But whether or not anybody's paid any attention up till now, we definitely came to the right place for April Fool's Day. Today's supposed to be a day about practical jokes, so I hope you had some laughs at the cleverness of many of the posters and the signs. My probably greatest laugh today was my opportunity to flush the turd. Absolutely, and the guy here hanging up the sign for me, we were extremely offended by the posting of a sign that said, unless we were here and on duty, and I don't know who, it's up to who to decide when a policeman is on or off duty, but unless we were here and we were on duty, then we were not authorized to bring our guns. We have already seen an assemblyman. We've been promised by the assemblyman that they will look into this, but it seems that elected officials and others in power are willing to ignore more and more laws. But the federal law, H.R. 218, actually gave us the right to carry our guns anywhere, anytime. So. We just have one thought. Maybe, just maybe, that was supposed to be an April Fool's joke. But we'll find out later. But we're not here about April Fools. We're not here about practical jokes. We're here because of a very impractical law. A law that's so bad that everyone in America should be insulted by it. But there's still too many Americans that have no idea what it says, or people from New York that has no idea what it says, or what abuses could ultimately result because of it. People today that were not able to carry signs with pictures of guns, or pictures of things that look like guns but very clearly were not, is the warning that we need to take back to our friends. And people that aren't the gun supporters have to realize once and for all that the SAFE Act, and I'll pay my fines, but that's their SAFE Act, that the SAFE Act is not about guns, it's about the Constitution. And the fact that somebody can't come out and carry a picture of a gun, whether it's here or elsewhere, is about the First Amendment. So you don't need a better example that this is the beginning of the end. To April Fool's Day. Many of us have no idea where it came from, so we did a little bit of research. And April Fools, according to some historians, dates all the way back to the 1500s, when people in France decided to switch from this ancient calendar called the Julian calendar that started on April 1st to the calendar that we use today. And if you can believe it, the government forgot to tell the people. They did. And when the people on April 1st went out and celebrated April 1st as the start of the new year, they were considered to be the fools. Because the government didn't tell them what the government did. Well, that government fell to a revolution shortly after we got our independence in this country. Unfortunately, this outrageous belief that elected officials or government leaders can do anything they want is continued across the centuries and will always be the enemy of liberty and freedom. Too many of our elected officials continue to believe that they can do whatever they want and whatever that suits them best. Last spring in Erie County became one of the 51, actually 52 other counties that the county passed a resolution to appeal the SAFE Act. There are only 62 counties in New York, but 52 of them passed resolutions. When that happened in Erie County, two of the legislators in Erie County that were opposed to that believed that this SAFE Act was somehow good for them, they stood up on the floor of the legislature in Erie and Buffalo, New York, and they said, independently, each of them said, that it doesn't matter what we do, Albany is going to do what Albany wants to do. What an insult. My fellow Americans, that statement is both shocking to the conscience and way too close to becoming a reality. It was actually a declaration that the democracy in New York State had come to an end. It was a declaration that the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution of the United States, and the Constitution of the State of New York, including the section about civil rights, had come to an end in New York State. And despite how shocking that was, and I stood right up and I began to spit, I couldn't even talk, despite how shocking that was, it didn't even get a single mention in our newspapers. Albany is going to do what Albany wants to do. My refrain today is, what an insult. One of the legislators that stood up that day lost his next election that November. But the other one was appointed to a higher paying position by this governor. We learned from that it doesn't always pay to carry the governor's garbage, but too often it still does. What an insult. Our governor recently got up and said to all the people that stayed in New York that if we don't think like him, we don't belong to be, we should not be in New York State. What an insult. Within days of that declaration, and we just heard from them, but the wonderful people from Remington Arms announced that they're going to build their new factories outside of New York State. How sad for the people in New York that are looking for jobs. But again, who can blame the Remington Arms? Several weeks ago, our governor suggested that inmates should get a free college education. Does this governor not know that our own children, the hardworking children of the law-abiding residents of this state, will not pay off their college loans until our grandchildren are in college? Maybe that is the plan of the governor, to keep our children and our grandchildren so broke that they can't buy guns. But because of this unSAFE Act, we can no longer give them ours. Right? The people of the state that still don't know that, they come up and say, I've decided I'm too old, I'm becoming concerned about what will happen to my guns when I'm gone. I gave them to my grandson. And they're asked, did you run a NICS check on your grandchild? And they look at you with like, what are you talking about? And they don't even realize that the governor, our legislators, some of them have passed a law that said a grandparent cannot give a gun to their own grandchild without first going to the state and having them sign off. That amounts to permission. No matter what you want to call it, you can't give a gun to a family member in New York State other than an immediate child without the state's permission. What an insult. How many of you recently got a letter in the mail inviting you to purchase a lifetime hunting license? A lot of people still haven't seen that. But the offense that I took to opening that up, a letter from the governor asking us to buy a lifetime hunting license with this inducement that if you do, he will give you a free license plate declaring the fact that you're a hunter and an option to have it recorded on your driver's license. The insult to our intelligence, inviting us to pay the governor to cross-reference motor vehicle records to people that own or use guns. What an insult. This is like Tom Sawyer and the whitewashing of the fence, right? This is how stupid the governor thinks the people of the state are. The letter bears the governor's signature, and it ends with this statement: I look forward to seeing you in New York's wonderful outdoors. I gotta confess something. I agree. I gotta confess. For the first time in years, I agree with part of what the governor says, because I too look forward to seeing the governor out. What the governor was really saying is, I look forward to seeing you in New York's wonderful outdoors. P.S. Just don't bring your gun. I've made it a habit in the last year of visiting gun shows, and I know the other sheriffs have done it as well, but to reinforce to you that police officers are not the enemy of gun owners. Rust and politicians are. That's why I came here today in uniform, and I need to tell you that hundreds of police officers, probably closer now, this is me personally, probably closer to thousands of police officers, have sent me letters, sent me emails, called me up or seen me on the street and thanked me for what I'm doing. So it's not the police officers, and please keep that in mind. These are the hardworking men and women like the one that we lost last night that are putting themselves at risk for public safety. But our government is not listening to us either. They're in the crowd. They're here with me. They're in the crowd among you. But keep it in mind now. This gets a little bit morbid for me, but I need you to listen to this. On August 30th, 1982, my best friend and my patrol partner in the state police was shot and killed by a man with a .30-30 rifle, a former mental patient. That individual then attempted to shoot me and another trooper. At the aftermath of that, neither I, the other trooper, nor any of the family of the deceased trooper ever blamed that gun. This tragedy resulted from a failure of the mental health system, but believe it or not, shortly after that tragedy, the former Governor Cuomo began closing psychiatric centers across New York State, including the one in which the man that killed my partner was a former resident. The governor turned them into prisons. The governor's son, our current governor, is continuing down that same faulty path, but he's not only closing the psychiatric centers, he's now closing the prisons as well, setting the stage for more violence in our community. Instead of reversing or correcting this mistake and other flawed practices like early parole for violent felons, New York's passed new laws, ignoring and hiding the fact that they have never enforced the existing laws. The gun that was used to kill my partner was supplied by a neighbor because the law, way back in 1982, said that a mental patient, a former mental patient, could not possess a gun, could not go and buy a new gun. That gun was supplied by a neighbor, and the law in 1982 said that you could not give a gun to a person, knowingly give a gun to a person that could not. In 1982, that individual was never prosecuted, and since 1982, I'm not aware of any other individual that's ever been prosecuted for giving a gun to a felon, knowing that they were a felon. Instead, they pass laws to control law-abiding people like you and me. What an insult. We don't need a new law. We never enforced the old law. In the years since that, they have supported expanding police access to mental health records in an emergency situation, like a hostage situation, or like something we faced recently, almost daily basis with the other agencies, violent domestics. But that's never happened. Instead, we got a new law that's discouraged individuals, including our former veterans, from seeking mental health services out of fear of the permanent loss of their firearms. This faulty law required the disclosure of mental health information to certain state employees to initiate the seizure of all firearms owned by pistol permit holders. Now listen to this and take it back. Once again, this is where this new law is not about gun owners, it's about personal freedoms in New York State. Last July, myself and these other two sheriffs attended a conference with people from DCJS, New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services. And at that event, they told us that from the passage of the law up until that date, 7,000 referrals, nearly 7,000 referrals had been made to non-mental health people in the state employment, not medical health professionals, but made to civilian employees of the state under this new law, suggesting that these individuals may be too dangerous to own their firearms, to possess firearms. We asked them then, out of that nearly 7,000, how many pistol permit holders were identified? The answer was 67. Less than 1%. So for every pistol permit owner identified as having guns under this new law, more than 100 non-gun holders, non-permit holders are being identified. So this law is not just about gun owners, it's about the personal privacy and the personal records of every resident of New York State. What an insult. New York State has refused, despite the fact that in July 67 pistol permit owners had been identified, they have refused to tell us how many revocations have resulted from the identification of those 67 people. But even the fact that it's 1% out of 100 that's identified as having a pistol permit, even that doesn't come close to the constitutional standards of a compelling state interest that should allow the state to override our personal privacy rights. I'm getting toward the end, but just 2 weeks ago, about 2 weeks ago today, two of our Erie County deputies responded to a domestic call. And as they approached the house in two different cars, but approaching together, both vehicles were struck in the windshield directly in front of the operator's face with rifle fire. 12 hours later, the individual that was responsible for that was arrested without injury as a result of a high level of cooperation, professionalism on the part of a number of cooperating law enforcement agencies in Western New York. But I need to tell you, despite the dozens of officers that were there, throughout the night, those officers repeatedly discussed this unsafe act. And it was both discussed and denounced throughout the night. But the two officers that were shot at were still there in the morning at the end of that event. They had plenty of time to think about what happened, and I have obviously had a chance to talk with them. And I asked them, what did you think about this SAFE Act before last night? And they said they've been opposed to it since they first heard about it. And having just been the victim of gunfire, what do you think about it now? And their answer was, my opinion has not changed one bit. And we need to ask you, who is in a better position to determine what makes us safe? The politicians with their bodyguards, or the law-abiding people of the state and the police officers that protect them? Who's in a better position? But our government won't listen to us. Let me end with this. This is a quote from the legendary Clint Eastwood. And I doubt that any of us could agree on what his greatest movie role was. I'd probably lean toward Gran Torino, and somebody back here said that they're kind of into Heartbreak Ridge, and somebody else thought Dirty Harry. Other ones into the roles that he played in many of the westerns. But the one common trait for Clint Eastwood is almost without exception, it was always a good guy with a gun that neutralized the bad guy with a gun. So this guy remains the hero to me. But Mr. Eastwood was reflecting on his life, and this is actually true, and some of you may have seen it posted. But he wrote down some things that he wanted to be remembered for. I have to think that he somehow was clairvoyant, and he wrote it for us to hear here today. But this is his words. As I enjoy my twilight years, I am often struck by the inevitability that the party must end. There will be a clear, cold morning when there just isn't any more. No more hugs, no more special moments to celebrate together, no more phone calls just to chat. It seems to me that one of the important things to do before that morning comes is to let every one of your family and friends know that you care about them by finding simple ways to let them know your heartfelt beliefs and the guiding principles of your life, so they can always say, he was my friend and I knew where he stood. So, just in case I'm gone tomorrow, please know this. like only Clint Eastwood do, he went off on about a 3-minute dissertation about a recently elected national official and that he didn't vote for him. But then he came back and he ended with this, and this is what I want to end with. Participating in a gun buyback program because you think that criminals have too many guns is like having yourself castrated because your neighbors have too many kids. I guess you think Clint wrote that for today too. Best regards, Clint. Who could have said it better? Thank you for standing up for what you believe in, and thank you for defending America.